Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Friday Forum. I'm your host, Cyndy McDonald, and I've had the privilege of being able to host these Friday Forums for a number of years. I'm an educator, an entrepreneur, and a producer. I also teach for the UCLA College Counseling Certificate Program, where I've been able to meet so many of you. I've met so many of you in all these different conferences, workshops, webinars, and I'm just so glad to have you here. And today, one of my guests is somebody that many of you know, and Brad has been here many times. Brad Schiller, who is the founder and CEO of Prompt and a new program called Launch. And so he'll tell you a little bit about that. But we're going to talk about a topic that's really crucial, something that's a hot topic right now, and that's how do we get our students to get their work done and managing those application timelines. And obviously, it's an important topic because I had well over 100 people sign up for this. I only sent out 2 emails, and that's why you guys are the best audience of all. So, Brad, you are in line for a treat.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, Cindy, maybe we could just wrap it up quickly and just say like you can't. No, I'm just kidding. You can't get them done.
Not
You're
happening.
it's over. That was we just wanted to bring everybody here to just tell you, it's sorry.
Don't worry, it's not possible. Well,
Yeah, not possible. No, it's definitely very possible. Definitely very possible.
yeah, hopefully we have some. I know I have some ideas and you have some data and ideas. So
Yeah.
as you're logging in, please let us know your name, your location, how many years you've been working with students, and then also what your role is. Are you an IEC? Are you a school counselor, or work for a CBO? Those things are really important. So your name, your location. Thank you, Karen. Wait, kudos to you. She got her name, location, how many years, and what your role is. Perfect. Follow Karen's example, and we'll all be in good shape. And this way, we all have this understanding. And one of the things I like to do on my Friday forums is I bring you experts in these topics that you care about. And you're experts too. So that's why I always keep the chats open, encourage conversation. And I hope you reach out to each other at different times outside of these Friday forums as well. So, Brad, let's get this going as
Yeah,
people
let's
are
get this.
logging in. Tell us a little bit more about how did you get into this world of college essay and, just college advising?
Yeah, all good. So, for those of you that may not know, a little bit about my background. So, I am a graduate of MIT, then went to work for McKinsey for a number of years, which is one of, like kind of the premier consultancy globally, management consultancy, and then left there to start companies. So, my first company, I was a founding team member of a company that made operating systems for drones. Went through Y Combinator, which is the top startup accelerator program in the world. And then when I left there, I was like, you know what? The thing that I always really cared like the most about was helping young people along their journey. Although I was relatively young at that time. Now I'm old, but helping young people along their journey of kind of getting their careers they want, making sure they're reaching their goals. And what you found was that what I found was one of the biggest challenges was around critical thinking skills, and in particular, writing skills, because those are related to critical thinking skills. So we started Prompt with the idea of improving people's writing abilities, and it just so happens to be one of the only times in a student's life where they actually care to improve their writing, where they actually care to write something and revise it and do it multiple times is college admissions essays. So we fell into that. It's just true. It's really unfortunate, but it's very true. And so we fell into that because we started editing people's essays for people, and then some IECs found us back in like 2016 or so, and we're like, "Hey, you're really good at this. Can you do this for us?" And we're like, "Sure. We could do that, and lo and behold, we now are the essay coaching team for hundreds of IECs, and then also our essay management software is used by I think over 450 IECs at this point. We have an entire course that's free for IECs on how to do essays, which we could drop in later as well. And then recently in the last year, I launched a program called Launch because I only name things that are really good and make easy puns. And so we launched it, something called Launch. Yes, bad puns. That's what we do. And so in the last year, and what that is it's a private network of growth-oriented IECs. So we have members who are focused on growing their business. Okay. And basically, what that looks like is we work on all sorts of different things together from product and pricing design to becoming more efficient so you can work with more students. And then also, we provide access, in addition to our writing coaching that we do through Prompt, to all sorts of other services that you can white label under your brand, such as tutoring, test prep, research, internships, career counseling for students that are already in college and are looking for careers, and so on and so forth. So we have 40 something members already in that program. We're adding more now. So that's it. That's the general gist of it. Cindy's one of our expert advisors there, and but we're just going to dive into this stuff. So take it away, Cindy.
All right. Well, and I've known you, Brad, since like you very began.
Yeah, we actually met in I think 2015 or 2016. One of the two. It's been a while. It's been
It's
a
been,
while.
so I've watched Prompt grow and expand, and your contributions to our industry are just immeasurable. So, in this experience, as you've been doing this, what do you see as some of the most common patterns that students have that struggle? Because we're all working with teenagers. And I think that's the key thing sometimes we forget is that these are teenagers. They are not always going to be on time. They're not always, they do struggle. So what are some of those patterns that you've observed from those students?
Yeah. And so the way I think about this is what are all the skills that are not being built in our education system today? Okay. And when you start thinking about that, what it comes down to is, critical thinking skills, problem solving, communication, time management, like all those executive functioning skills. Okay.
Hmm.
And what I like to also think about is agency. Okay. So students that are high agency are the ones that you have the least issues with. Okay. From a timing perspective, right? And by
Hmm.
high agency, that is usually somebody that believes that they can kind of control the world around them, that they can actually influence what is going to happen to them and what's occurring with the actions that they are taking. Okay. So these are people that like are the really driven, very gritty people that are, hey, I'm going to be able to, I see this challenge. I can kind of figure out my pathway along this and get through it. Okay. And those tend to also be people with like stronger critical thinking skills, etc. Okay. And then you have people that are much lower agency. And those are the students where we spend most of our time and have the most challenges. Because those are people that tend to believe that that kind of they cannot control the world and stuff is kind of they're just kind of letting stuff happen to them and they don't feel in control of that. Okay.
Hmm.
And that is where I think is the biggest gap in terms of where you start seeing your students have challenges with actually completing stuff, getting stuff done on time, etc. Is because they don't have that agency to go do that. And by the way, becoming high agency is a learnable skill. Okay, it's not just like an innate thing. All right. And so a lot of how I think about things is how do we make people high agency, right?
Hmm.
Like what are the tools? What are the things that we need to do in our counseling processes that kind of start getting people on the path to doing that? Because guess what? If you really distill down, and I know we talk about like the 5 traits colleges look for in essays, the in applicants, we talk about that we always talk about. We also talk about like what colleges look for in students. It's like they're going to be successful in college and beyond. What it really comes down to is they want to accept students that are very high agency, because those people are going to be really successful, right? So think about it from that perspective. So um, So when I identify students that are likely to have that challenge or have challenge completing stuff, it's you can kind of tell that even just in an intake meeting, is this a high agency student or not? Okay, and that's where you start seeing some challenges, and then we can get into like how that all kind of flows and what we can do about it and that sort of thing. But the way I think about it is that there's a lot of research on what's called mentally daunting tasks. So these are tasks that is something that somebody hasn't really done before. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
So they don't know exactly how to do it, right? There's no like very clear structured way to do it. All right. No step-by-step instruction immediately in front of them. And when a student runs into that kind of task, that is the thing that they're most likely to procrastinate on.
Hmm.
Okay. Because think about all of ourselves.
Daunting.
It's the same thing, right? We have that email that a parent sent to us that is like, oh my goodness, like I don't know how to respond to this right now. Maybe it only takes you 5 minutes to respond and figure it out, but you're not sure in that moment. And so you kind of put it off and you get more and more stressed thinking about it. Okay. And then you finally get to it and you feel better, right? This is what's happening to these students all the time. Okay. And so those are our students that we need to do the most work with and have the most kind of process, honestly, in place and those instructions to make sure stuff happens. So I'll pause there, but that's kind of the way I think about things.
Well, and that brings up a really good point because the parents, we all talk about helicopter parents and Velcro parents, or whatever term snowplow parents, whatever you want to apply to them. But this process that our students are going through now when they're applying to college, it was different for the parents. So the parents can't really fully prepare the students because what their experience was is not replicated by their students. So it truly is a brand new experience all the way around. And that's part of the reason I know we see students procrastinate too, because they're also afraid to, like, if they get started on it, what's the end outcome going to be? And I'm afraid to submit it because then I've committed. I mean, there's all these psychology things that go along with
Yeah,
it, as part of the process.
yeah, for sure. And one of the interesting things from a parent's perspective, right, is I always like to think about why did a parent buy this IEC service? Okay. Or if you're a high school counselor, why did this parent, especially if you're an independent school counselor, decide on this high school? Okay. And keep in mind, they know their kids better than anyone, right? They're their parents. And a big reason why they make these decisions is because they know that their kids are not going to do it on their own. So
Hmm.
they're actually buying the accountability, or as an IC once told me, outsourcing the nudge. So they don't have to
Okay.
be the one
Yeah. Hmm.
that's like driving the ship, okay? Because they've probably tried it and their kid just doesn't listen to them.
Right.
Okay. As my cousin who went to Harvard Law School once told me about his kids when they were kind of teenagers, his daughters. He was like, uh, my kids think I am the dumbest person in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And guess what? Why are you being hired? Honestly, a lot of times it's to provide the same advice that the parent would provide, but the kid wouldn't listen to the parent. Okay. And by the way, from a high school counselor perspective as well, right? It's like, okay, sometimes the parents might call you, be like, can you tell the kid this?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
It's
I've
like
had that
everybody's in
happen.
agreement that on this, but the kid
Yes.
is just not going to listen, right?
Yep.
And so this whole thing on outsourcing the nudge, outsourcing that accountability, and that's why, and it's very interesting, is that when IEC is actually selling, I always talk about, it's not the conversation for today, but it's an important point, is they're buying the process actually. They're
Mhm.
buying the outcome and then they're buying like, okay, these are the outcomes that I'm looking for. That's what they're trying to buy. And
Right.
then you make them comfortable in achieving those outcomes because you have a good process to getting that outcome done. Okay.
Mhm.
So what's interesting is that the clients, yeah, they want like customized, personalized. They say that, but they really want like the process and they want to understand, oh, this is what we're going to do and when. Okay. And then it be customized kind of within that framework. Yeah.
Right. And I talk about that in a marketing workshop that I do and how you put the client in the middle of the story and you need to find out what their definition of success is and you provide a
Yeah.
plan, you become the hero, you're the one that's providing those
Yeah.
services.
And I know that's not the topic for today, but I think
Right.
it all
But
actually leads, all of this actually fits together in a
mhm.
lot of ways. Because today we're going to be talking a lot about process, right?
Yeah.
'Cause that's the stuff that actually gets the kids done early.
So I want to go back to a comment you said, and then we're going to go into this process. But you mentioned, like in a first meeting, you can tell if a student's high agency or not. How do you know that? How do you find that?
Well,
How do you
when
identify
you
in a
it,
meeting?
it it's basically what have they done or accomplished outside of the classroom? Okay, very simple. We talk a lot about meaningful work, meaningful experiences, things that they've done where they've actually taken initiative and had impact. Okay. So if they can talk about situations where they've taken initiative and had impact, ideally some sort of quantifiable impact, that's
Hmm.
when you know that like you want the kid that's like, okay, no matter what situation they're in, if they see something that could be made better, they make it better. That's a high agency kid. All right. And usually when you're doing an intake or a consultation with a family, you're trying to get a sense of all of what is this kid like so I can make a recommendation. And
Hmm.
so you can really identify that very much on the front end and then
Hmm.
actually tailor you're already probably tailoring your messages a little bit. But if you're finding that, oh, this is kind of a lower agency kid, your messaging in like the actual sale starts being more on like the outsourcing the nudge side of things
Hmm.
versus the like, let's expand this profile and make it even stronger from a personal brand standpoint, right? So that you're getting in that initial consultation is like when you're getting all the information in so you can make a suggestion. And then you have to be comfortable with working with lower agency students, right?
Right.
That and,
Right.
and, and there's it's a lot that goes with that, right? And I mean, everybody has done it. So, it's,
Right.
but also you're all here. So there's a reason.
Exactly. Well, so you and I had this conversation recently, and I loved the comment you said. And sometimes we feel as college counselors and advisors that student procrastination is not our problem, but you have a different take on it. So let's go
Yeah.
over.
Do you want me to give the line or do you want to give the
Yeah,
line?
go ahead.
Okay. So my take is that procrastination is our problem. Okay. And it all comes back to what did we just talk about? Why did a family buy you?
Hmm.
They bought you for an outcome, which is the admissions outcomes they're looking for. Okay. And therefore, if you work your way back from that, it's strong applications, it's a less stressful process, it's applying to the right schools, right? All of that sort of stuff. Okay. And if a student's really procrastinating, what are they procrastinating on? It's getting the applications done, it's getting the essays done, right? And so, yes, in our contracts, in our expectations that we set with students, we can say everything has to be in by X date. Everything has to be done by X date. I won't look at it after X date. And you can hold them to that, and the parents will look at that and be like, yep, I guess that's just what happened. Little Timmy he messed it up again. Okay. But is that client going to be your big champion of the world? Maybe not. Okay. Are they going to have like the best, 5-star rating and testimonial in history? Maybe not. I was talking to an IEC just the other day, which I mean, I talk to many IECs every day. That's what I literally do now, similar to Cyndy. And guess what? They were telling me I had a student didn't get the work done by the deadline. They knew they didn't get the work done by the deadline. They knew that that was part of the contract or whatever. And in the testimonial, what was said, if it wasn't the 5 star, it's like a 4 star. And what's said in the testimonial is, I don't think that this was, you know, it literally said in there, it's like, I didn't get the service that level that I wanted, that I needed. And they said, I know the contract said that this needed to be done, but I felt left, just left by the wayside. Okay. And was the IC completely in their rights to do that? Yes. Okay. But was that maybe the right choice for your business? Maybe not long
Right.
term. Okay. And so this really comes down to this is like procrastination, right? As much as we don't want it to be our problem, it is our problem because that's honestly why a lot of these families bought us. They may not have explicitly told you that when they signed the contract, okay?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
they knew that this might be a problem, and that's one of the primary reasons they bought you, okay?
Hmm.
And so everything we can do or can't, willing to do or whatever. And by the way, you're always going to have some stragglers. If you work with 30 seniors a year, you're probably going to have 2 or 3 stragglers. Even if you are like crushing everything process wise, it's always going to be 2 to 3 kids. What you don't
Hmm.
want it to be is 15 of them. Okay.
Right. Right.
That's it. Okay.
Well, and I think that's the key is to change our mindset a little bit to we know students are going to be procrastinators, plan on it, put that into your system and your process. So what are some ideas? What are some things that you have found? I mean, both you and I have worked with, hundreds of consultants, and have seen lots of different approaches. So I know you have some data and things like that too. So
Yeah,
what are
so we
the
have some data on
strategies
essays that
that
I'm going to
work?
show in
Okay.
just a minute. But I think that let's talk kind of about non-essay stuff first really quickly,
Okay.
and then we'll get to essays, which is where like the procrastination, I guess, really meets the road, right? Like, or whatever you want to call it, right? Maybe it's roadkill. I don't know. Hopefully it's roadkill. It doesn't. Anyways, the most important things that we find is having a very clearly defined curriculum with students is very, very important. Okay. And what I mean by that is that every single meeting that you have with a student needs to have a clearly defined purpose and outcome. Okay. And there needs to be pre-work stuff that the student has to complete and send to you prior to that meeting occurring. Okay. Very important. Now, the pre-work needs to be, in many cases, fairly paint by number, right? So, in other words, there's very clear instructions of what to do, so it doesn't feel like very mentally daunting. It's not like, hey, come with a list of 3 schools you might be interested in. That's not a great example of pre-work because what are they going to do? They're not going to put any thought into it. They're just going to put a few names together, right? Instead, it's I want you to identify by number one, you said that these are the 3 things you cared about in a school. I want you to fill in this chart, right? That says, here's this school, does this match pros and cons or whatever it is? Does this school, does this match? Blah, 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 right? So it's like that could be like an example of like school research oriented type pre-work. Okay. It could also be, okay, we need to start putting together like maybe it's like the resume. Okay. Here's the instructions on how to do a resume. Here's an example. I want you to spend some time doing that before we meet. I'll review that and then we're going to talk about that and then go through your activities. We're like summer planning. Okay. There's all of these things to do, but we always want students doing a task before we meet with them. On the essay side of things, one of the most common things that we see is that we'll provide feedback on an essay and the students like, okay, now I want to meet to go over it. No, we don't do that. Okay. Why don't we do that? Because those meetings are the most worthless meetings in history because the student has not thought one iota about the feedback that was provided. They probably haven't even read the feedback that was provided. And they have definitely not tried to implement the feedback that was provided. Okay. What do you do instead? You say, okay, we could schedule a meeting, but first you need to take the feedback, implement it, and then schedule it. And what happens? Almost nobody schedules the meeting because now they took action and they figured it out. Okay. And that's also why written feedback needs to be very step by step too. Okay. Because once again, you need to really paint by number as much as possible for many of these students, especially the lower agency students, who otherwise would consider this too much of a mentally daunting activity to do it. Okay, you need to be very clear on the exact steps, the exact things that they need to do. And guess what? Then they start to learn with that scaffolding exactly kind of how to approach these things. Okay. And what's crazy is that, and you should reflect on kind of your own meetings with students. Is like, how frequently do you have them where you're just like, well, this was kind of a waste of time. Okay. The student wasn't prepared, whatever. And if the student's not prepared early on in your process, you might need to include and teach some consequences. Like, okay, you booked this meeting with me. If you don't have your assignments to me 24 hours in advance or 48 hours in advance, I'm canceling it. And I'm letting your parents know it's canceled.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. And that's perfectly fine to do in this case. And you want to teach them that early on. Okay. And you set that expectation with them when you onboard the family and say, this is what we're going to do. Here's the expectations. Here's what happens.
Hmm.
You want to get them on the right path as early as possible before the real difficult, stressful stuff of essay starts. Okay. That's really important here. Um, I'll bring up some essay related data because I think that's interesting next. But Cyndy, anything you wanted to add there?
I definitely think, having a process and a procedure is a key element to this. And building expectations also helps the students. And you mentioned bringing in parents and letting parents know. I know as a counselor, a lot of times, I always included parents in the follow-up emails, also included them in the assignments that the students had, and they would get a reminder, a week before or a day before, and then the parents would be the ones that are like, hey, you need to get this done. You're meeting with Cyndy. And
Yeah,
so your parent, and many times the parents will become partners with you in building that.
great.
Sometimes we have to be a little careful. We don't want to add to the anxiety of those, what the students is going through. Sometimes parents really accentuate that, but in general, having that. But I can tell I've had many students who've come to meetings. If I canceled every meeting that they were not prepared for, then but
Yeah, I'm saying there's a level of aggressiveness, and it's
yeah.
all your personality and what you want to do that you can possibly get away with. Because I know some IECs that are very strict on that. At the
Hmm.
same
Hmm.
time, like you might be like, well, can't do that. That's fine. And by the way, the level of pre-work that kids submit is sometimes varies widely, right?
Right, right.
And
And I
so
also think it depends on the types of students, that you're working with. What their expectations, what they're used to doing, within their schoolwork and their school and things like that too. So,
yeah, definitely. One of the things that I'll just mention is you're saying as parents are like the partners here, which I totally agree with, is I just want to mention that, and this is very important, is that I actually consider the parent your customer more
hmm.
than the student.
Hmm.
They're the ones who pay. They're the ones that want a certain outcome for their kid. They're trying to get their kid launched into life. And they're also the ones where all of your referrals are going to come from.
Hmm.
Okay. So they're much more the customer than your student. And so keeping them in the loop in the process is critical. What you don't want to have happen at the end of the process, and we'll talk about this with essays in terms of how to make the essay process better. One of the worst things that can possibly happen is that a parent reads a draft of the essay and just like goes off. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, and that's actually a fixable, solvable situation, but on the front end. But this is also where a parent gets frustrated with you. Okay. And
Hmm.
even if you resolve that and like get them happy, they've still been frustrated for some period of time. Okay. Which is bad. And so that's I think a really critical component of this is like really figuring out and making sure you're involving the parents well enough, being that ally, the parent as your ally with you, So that way they can execute, right? And be your partner with kind of accountability
Mhm.
and providing that. We also have, IECs will, if, by the way, you're not good at process and accountability and messaging students and keeping them on track or whatever it is, um, hire a virtual assistant or somebody to do that for you. Okay. That will pay off
Oh yeah.
over and over and over again. By the way, that's not my thing. I preach about holding people accountable and all of that sort of stuff, but like I would be terrible at it. I have an entire student success team that's what they do
Yeah.
because I cannot. That's not my thing. Okay, not my thing. And I know many of you that's not your thing either, but it's really important.
Mhm.
And so I think that I just want to highlight that. So I'm going to bring up a couple of pieces of data that
Okay.
if you've been on any of my webinars about essays, you would have seen at some point. Um, but this is, I think, really, really, really important. Is one, first, really understanding the amount of time that it actually takes for you to provide essay coaching for students. And then the second thing that I'm going to show is like, when does this essay coaching actually occur? Okay. Um, and then we'll talk about like how to actually make this more efficient and better and take kind of spread out over a longer period of time. So this is our actual data, okay? Is that high achievers, these are students applying to multiple Ivy and equivalent colleges, so roughly top 30 colleges, and usually applying at least two, and usually applying to five, six, or more, use 33 hours of essay coaching. That includes live meetings to talk about stuff, etc., and then written feedback on all of their drafts. Okay? That's our data. 33 hours. Now, I know not every IEC does that are working with these students, but when we do this, that's what it is. 33 hours. That's a lot of time, okay, per student. And then for other students, we find about 15 hours on average. Sometimes it's like 8 to 10 or less, depending on the type of student that you work with. But there's a lot less variance here, actually, in terms of this, right? So usually it's like you might do 20, might do 10, but for high achievers, like 33 is the average. We once had a kid that used 95 hours of coaching.
Wow.
Okay, they were playing like 20, like the 20 of the top 20, right? Like, I mean, it was just,
Hmm.
and very high, high agency and very like, meticulous and, all of that. So they were just literally just so much feedback on everything. And that was like the crazy situation. But my point is like the difference between 30 and 50 and 60 is a lot of hours. Okay. And you run into that quite a bit. Now, the most important thing is in understanding is that, and this is the most important thing for you and your business and kind of how you think about kind of your efficiency, especially with essays and applications, is that there's kind of October is like the month that's the most critical, right? Everybody
Yeah.
knows it. October
Yeah.
is the month that's the most critical. Um, so we basically there's kind of two types of IECs. Okay. There are IECs that are really good with process and getting their kids done, and IECs that are not so good with process and getting it done. And where does the IECs that struggle with that happen? They do 30+% of all essay coaching hours in October. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, This is real data, real averages that we take out of our system, obviously anonymized. I know who this is. I won't tell you. But there's a lot, okay, that do a substantial percentage of hours in October. And why is that bad? One, you have a lot of students that are scrambling, getting stuff done. Two, you end up with worse essays because they're scrambling to get them done at the end. You also then have less time to provide feedback on each essay. It's a problem, okay? And so on and so forth. All right. And you also can't work with as many students per year,
Right. Right.
okay?
Becomes
Because
very limiting.
you're literally planning just for October and you can kind of max out at 20, maybe 25 max high achievers when you're kind of struggling with most of your hours at that time of the year. Um, and you end up with more unhappy clients. Okay, so it's like basically a lot of bad stuff. All right. And I would say like a pretty substantial percentage of IECs like are that. Okay. Like more than half is the way to think about it. It's 30+% of hours. I see some IECs getting up near 40% of all their hours are in October on essays. Okay? Really not good. What is best practice is about 20% of hours are in October. And another 20% are in September. And another 20% are in August. Okay? So
Mhm.
you basically have spread all that work out between August and October. And you do obviously a bit less in kind of the November, December timeframe. But you kind of have like a much steadier workload. Okay. We have IECs that we work with, especially within launch, that really have the stuff down, and their kids are done with all their apps by like October 15th or so. Okay. And so it's really about kind of having a very clearly like how, I guess people are like, oh, how do you do this, right? And so we can kind of go into that. But any reactions, Cindy, to this, or anybody in the chat to kind of how this kind of
Yeah, I'd be
what
interested in hearing how many people that are on the call today feel like this describes them in terms of 30%, 40% of their coaching hours in October. Um, I, because I'm in California, we've always had a much later coaching
yeah,
schedule because for years you couldn't even open a UC application until November 1st. So that just pushed our timeline so much later. And now that it is available much earlier, but we still have limitations even with the CSU applications. So I think part of it depends. Like I always loved people in Texas, like you can submit applications in August. And if you didn't have your UT Austin application in by mid-September, you were out of luck. So having those different, the application timelines do vary based on where you're applying. And then if students are applying internationally, then that adds a whole nother level and such. So but this, it does. I mean, the fall is such a crunch time, and it goes to that whole procrastination of students. They know they need to, but this is one of the things that I'll talk about. One of the things that I found, it's like telling them, yes, you have to get this done, but not giving them a way or a space to do it. It's like going and exercising. We all need to know, we all know we need to do that. But if I know I have a friend waiting for me, I'm much more likely to go and do it, or, I have a class to go to or whatever. But just saying, hey, you need to get your applications done and not providing a way or a structure to do it can
yeah.
contribute to this.
For sure. The worst thing that we can do is be like, hey, go write this draft, and they just don't have enough to go do it.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you set a deadline. And what we're now seeing increasingly is like a student will just be like, if they don't really know what's going on or how to do that, they're more at risk of just going to AI and just having an AI write it. Okay.
Yep.
And and then that leads to all sorts of other problems down the road, and it just wastes a lot of time.
Hmm.
We had a question come in around like managing workload for seniors late in the game. And
Hmm.
the goal here is, and this is one of the reasons why, this optimized kind of processor like an IEC here that's doing about 20% in October. Guess what? Those IECs are taking on those late arriving families because they can fit in doing a bunch of work with that one kid like over a couple of weeks because a lot of their kids are nearing completion. Okay. So it's an opportunity to make more. There's also an opportunity to leverage writing coaches because usually those late arriving families are like, they just want like anything you can do with for them, they'll be your hero. So if you have a writing coaching team or us, like that tends to work really well. But what I want to touch on is how do you actually get these kids done? Okay, a few
Yep.
strategies
Yep.
there, and how do you deal with like in particular like the kids that are lower agency, like how do you get that done? Okay,
Okay.
now the and I won't go through slides on this even though I have them, but it's just easier to talk through, and we have like a
Mhm.
whole course on this, so feel free to we'll drop that link in.
Yeah,
But
we'll have the link
the
in the show
yeah,
notes.
okay, in the show notes, fantastic. So the way that I think about this is what you're trying to do is you're trying to kind of like if you think about like the writing process, okay, the it really like what it should take maybe a week, 2 weeks to write a Common App essay. Why
Hmm.
are we taking months? Doesn't make sense.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
How long does it take to write a first draft of a Common App essay once you know what you're writing about? Less than an hour.
Hmm.
Revisions of your first draft might take a little longer, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever. But if you actually add up the amount of time that a kid is actually going to sit and work on their essay to get it to completion, maybe 4 hours. It's not 2 months. Okay.
Right. Right. Right.
So why does it take 2 months? Why does it take so long? Part of that's on us, okay, in terms of like we are somehow spacing this out or doing too many things, whatever. But it's also very much on the student because they're like, there's too many mentally daunting situations that they're in while working on this where they're actually taking a lot of time to between drafts or between something, right? Or between actions that they're taking. And so there's a few things that you can do to really combat this. One is if you are capable or have like the ability to be in person with people, is IECs will do like in-person college essay workshops.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. And you have like 2 or 3 of those over the summer. You have 2, 3 days that they're there. And it's time that they're there and they know they're going to be working on it and you are overseeing them. It's like a classroom environment and this stuff is just going to get done. Okay. So that is one way. And you can apply a lot of those principles to other ways of making this happen. Okay. So what we like to do is number one, you have to think about like, I think we give many of these kids, honestly, just too much credit for what they're capable of doing. Okay. Maybe that's not the right way
Uh-huh.
of thinking about it. But the problem is that we have the mindset of what am I capable of? And not like, and you're much older now, right? And you might have go back and think, oh yeah, I was capable of that, or I could have done that, or I would have done, and maybe you wouldn't have. Okay. Like we're kind of looking at it with different eyes back to the past. Okay. And so I think we're just giving them too much credit. Oh, they could just, if I just tell them to do it, they should just do it, or they should know how to do it. And the fact
Right.
of the matter
Right.
is that, and so I do a lot of stuff with literacy education and for many years. The fact of
Hmm.
the matter is that writing planning, so the process of like literally creating an outline for an essay, is rarely taught, required, or assessed in the vast majority of classrooms in the country. Okay, so most of these kids have no idea how to create an outline. Keep that in mind. Okay. So what do you want to do with these kids? It's not just like, let's figure out what to write about or what you're going to write about. It's actually creating the outline with them.
Hmm.
That is a critical component of this. Create the outline with them. So I'm just going to talk mostly about like getting a first draft started for any kind of type of essay. And then we'll get into like, what do you do even on the front end of the process before you even do that? Okay. But here's what we like to do. So we'll say, okay, we have what we call our application planning meeting where we're kind of deciding what to write about. And then we have like an outline meeting where we're going to outline the essay together. And it's usually pretty detailed, a detailed outline that even kind of has like, here's how we're going to start it. Okay. Then what you want to do is you want to say, okay, now you have your outline. And you tell them this beforehand, is like, you need to block out an hour after this meeting is over.
Hmm.
And you are writing it right then. And I
Hmm.
am expecting it submitted
Hmm.
in that amount of time. And if you have not submitted it, you are getting a message from me. Okay. Now, you can even get more aggressive than that if you know that's a kid that might struggle to then go execute that. You say, okay, we're blocking 2 hours together. We're going to create the outline. Then I'm going to go off camera, off audio. I'm going to go work on something else. And I am going to come back in 45 minutes. And we are going to look at it really quickly together. You're going to send it in and we're done. Okay. Why do you need to do something like this? Like in a very aggressive way? It's because students, even when they have the outline, it's still fairly mentally daunting for them to actually write out the whole essay. So they're not
Hmm.
going to usually do it right away, even though the absolute best time to do it is while it's very fresh in their mind of exactly what they're supposed to go do, because you just talked about it. So they already were like in a very mentally kind of high state while they were working with you, right? Um, and so usually most students want to do after they meet with you is be like mentally kind of decompress and shut down.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
once they've done that, you've got days ahead of you for them to like actually get back to this. Okay.
Hmm.
Because they're
Hmm.
going to be like, ah, I'll just do it later. And then they start forgetting different things. And it actually becomes more and more mentally daunting to them because they've now kind of forgotten some of the things that you may have said to them.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. So you really want to get that, and 2 hours is not too long, right? They have to sit for the SAT for 2 hours. They're in school for 2 hours. They're doing finals for a couple hours, an AP exam for a couple hours. Okay. You need to increase the stakes, is my point, and have like a very clear, like, nope, I expect this now.
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
That is the most important thing. Um, and that can work really, really well. Just it's annoying. It's kind of babysitting, if you will, but you will save a lot of your own time later
Hmm. Hmm.
because they'll also
And
have a
it
better first draft.
and it gets the students kind of kick-started, and understanding that they can do this. It gets them over that daunting task,
Yeah, and
process.
by the way, we don't like the whole like we're gonna stay on Zoom. We don't even do that usually, but like we'll do it if
Right.
we really need to. Because most students don't need that, but your students that are like the ones that you're like, I am the most
Hmm.
concerned here, implement like a process like that and just be like, you know what, I've just got to deal with this, at least for this essay. We might need to do it for the first couple supplements. Like at some point we kind of could stop.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
Just to make that happen. Others will try to run like a workshop with a bunch of students together, so that way everybody's kind of writing at the same time.
Yep.
Another interesting strategy
Can
is
do
you have
that.
accountability buddies. So you have two students, you put them together, and you were like, hey, you need to match up when you're going to write together, and you're going to then do it together, and then I
Hmm.
expect to see the result of that. And usually an accountability, like there's actually like work buddy accountability websites out there as well, but essentially the concept is you're both want to accomplish something. You say hi to each other and be like, yep, we're going to accomplish this thing. And then 1 hour later, you come back and you're like, yep, we accomplished it. Right. So there's like a very clearly like defined window. And it's a lot of psychology, obviously, behind that. But it works really, really well. Okay. So there's a lot of different things you can do. I think the simplest thing is like, after you're like, we have the outline, go write it, is have like a very clear, like, I want that within an hour. And if I don't see that, I'm messaging you. And if you think the student won't be capable of that, hey, I'm gonna stay on here. Okay. I'm gonna go do something else. And if you run into trouble, like ping me, that's fine, right? I'll come
Hmm.
back.
Hmm.
But at the end of this, we're gonna sit and do this together. Okay. Yeah,
So
like, I
you can
expect it done.
take, so it sounds like what's effective and efficient is, have timelines and let the students and the parents know we're going to start this point of the process with this, and then this is going to happen.
Yeah, and
And
that's what I was gonna get to is like the what do you do at the beginning of the process really matters for
Mhm.
later. Okay. And that's spot on, right? Is basically you have a timeline laid out, you customize it for that student. If they have a vacation, you kind of build that into it, whatever. Okay. And you say, look, we're gonna set expectations. Okay, we have like an essay expectation like timeline agreement. We have a draft that you can use as an IEC. It's in our essay course. Okay, but basically you say, look, this is the timeline we operate under. Our expectations is every time you get feedback back on a draft, we want it back within 2 days of you getting it back.
Yep,
Okay,
yep.
that you're always going to get that as your due date. And we do our best to turn it around within 2 days for you. You have to do
You
your
can
best
do
to
it.
turn it around within 2 days for us.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
So that way it's still very fresh in their minds. And if you really work at this and work in this way, and if the student hasn't turned it in on time, they're getting reminders and that sort of thing. Maybe you have to loop in the
Hmm.
parent if needed. You can really get this Common App essay done in a couple weeks.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
no reason not to.
The
Okay.
Wild Writing Workshop has a
Yeah, it's
similar
the same. Yeah,
structure.
we have
They have the same
very
structure
similar
as
philosophies.
type of
Very,
thing.
very,
So
very similar
yeah.
philosophies. But the
Hmm.
key is like you have those expectations set up ahead of time. And what we like to do is have like an essay onboarding meeting. So it's like, okay, or essay kickoff meeting. We're about to
Hmm.
start essays. You can build this into one of your other meetings because it's maybe 15, 20 minutes. It's not like the longest time in the world. Okay. We're about to start essays, so we're going to talk about the essay process. And I like to have the parent there as well as at least one of the parents and the kids, so they can all agree, like, yep, this is how we are going to do this. We are in agreement that this is what we are going to do. So it's easier to hold them accountable to this if they've like agreed to it. You can even have them sign it if you want. Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah. You
Hmm.
explain why don't use AI. Okay. You can explain that in that meeting so you don't have to deal with that later. Okay. And be like, if I catch you using AI, I will tell you. But don't do it, right? Because it's going to waste everybody's time because it's going to be obvious, okay? And so on and so forth. So there's a way to do that. And then the other thing we like to do is one, we like to have students have pre-work before we meet with them for
Hmm.
the first meeting on essays. So they've actually thought a lot about the content that they might write about on their applications. And then the second thing is we like the parents to do pre-work too.
Oh.
Okay. So we have a parent intake form on essays where we are basically asking them for what are things that you think should go on these essays. Okay. What are things, and we also use that to train them on what colleges are looking for in essays a little bit.
Hmm.
So that way, when they read an essay later, they can kind of remember that versus thinking like, and why do we do this? It's like, why is it how little Billy loved to play with Legos at 3 years old? Like, why isn't that there? Like, and they're just like mad. Okay? Like, you're trying to avoid that. They could write on their form, little Billy likes to play Legos, 3 years old. And then they'll know that that was at least an input that you considered. Um, and there's a reason why you didn't consider it, but as we all know, but the parents don't know that, right?
Hmm.
And so doing like an intake form for them. And then once again, it's like laying out that timeline. We like to work application by application. So after you're done with the Common App essay, we pick the first application, which is usually we like it to be one of the schools you care the most about.
Hmm.
And then we do all of those supplements for that school. Then we move to the next school. And we do all
Hmm.
the supplements and all the writing for that school, and then move to the next school. By the time you get to like the third school, you start doing like two schools at a time, and then you're done. And usually it's like you try to get done in like a 2 to 3 week period for each of those. And if you start kind of in that June timeframe with the Common App essay, or even into July, you're kind of wrapped up with all of this, in kind of mid-September, early October, right? That's just kind of how the timeline, functionally ends up working. And as I said, if you have the students procrastinating, you got to try something different other than like, hey, get this to me, hey, get this to me, and nagging them
Right.
or pulling the parent in. That's when you might have to have a meeting. You might have to be like, hey, I'm going to hold office hours for kids that are still working on essays. Like, you have to attend, right? So that way you can kind of jump around and make sure that they're actually doing that activity at that time, and so on and so forth. You can't drive to their house, or maybe if you do, like maybe there's an in-person meeting, right? Like just like, or
Right.
be like, hey, parent, you need to sit with this kid until they've done it, right? You can't just like let it go, right? Just sit with
Ex-
them, but say nothing. Like read a book, be on your phone, whatever, but like sit with them so there's some sort of accountability. The key is that you have to start identifying very early who are your kids that are going to struggle with this, which is not hard to do, and then start applying some of these techniques earlier so that way you don't have this challenge later.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and I'm going to, something that I've done is from the very beginning is that I've implemented it as a peer group process. And I don't know, a lot of times people will tell me, oh, I can't do that. People are paying me for a one-on-one, having that one-on-one high touch. But if it's part of the process, my parents know this is part of the reason they sign up with me because I do application workshops, they're application labs, and I've done it forever. I used to do it in person. My students would come into my office and work together and they loved it. They enjoyed it. In fact, I've had students who were sad when their application labs were done. And so I quit. I don't meet independently, individually working on all this stuff. If it's application workshop, I mean, application related, they do it in an application lab and they sign up and it's a requirement. All my students have to do this. Do they all follow through? No, but if they don't sign up, then I go after them and say, hey, or talk to their parents. Like Johnny hasn't signed up. I need him to sign up for 4 different times. And I tell them the goal of the labs is to work on your applications. And I do some of the same things that you talked about. Like I'm not sitting there talking to them the whole time. It's a dedicated time where they know they can work on their applications. And a lot of times, it'd be a Saturday or a Sunday and I would rotate the different nights. One week could be Monday and Wednesday, and the next week could be Tuesday, Thursday. So I'd pick up all of my athletes and everybody and all their extracurriculars. And they knew they had to set up times, and it gives them a time where they can say, okay, I'm going to work on my applications.
Yeah. And so
And
I'm in a very much agreement with that. And I said, I think there's a lot, it's always surprising to people, like, what can you do? And families are totally okay with. Okay. And so this is one of the things where these workshops or that sort of thing, or like, hey, I actually have hours that I'm there or somebody's there and monitoring this to make sure they get it done. You'd be surprised. Like parents actually really like that stuff.
they
Okay.
totally
Because
do.
and it takes the burden a little bit off of them from an accountability perspective. And so I think that those are really good strategies. We don't do the group workshops because we just only do the one-on-one stuff. So you have to do
Mhm.
slightly different strategies in that case. But the key is like you have to have very defined hours, and a lot of times you have to a time period, and a lot of times, as I said, you actually have to have like the oversight during that time period to make sure they're working on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was a thing that a couple things came in here. One is for essay prompts that aren't released till later, such as September, we just don't do those until they're released.
Hmm.
Okay, we have a very strict like we don't like just assume that the school is going to keep the essays the same because it's not great. It's not fun when you do an essay and then like
And
you
then it
actually
does
need
all.
to change it.
Right. Right.
It's not great. Okay. Um, and so on and so forth. So we just wait until the schools release it. Okay, we don't
Hmm.
know which schools are going to be new or not. Enough schools release before August 1st that there's plenty to get started on. There's enough schools that release, beginning of August. It's very like rare that you have nothing to work on until early September. In terms of student privacy, do you have concerns there? I don't have
No,
concerns at
I
all.
have never, ever, and I've been doing this probably since the time I began, because it's the only thing that made sense to me was how do you get these students and how do you get their applications done? Well, you work on them together. Because you don't want to duplicate effort, unless you're charging a really high price. And this is why I was able to charge a little less because I took my time and used it with multiple students. But I mean, in the very intake, I tell the parents, like, your students, it's part of my description, my service description. Students are going to work together in writing workshops because I do a same thing. I do a writing workshop over a, a 2-day writing workshop, and they do applications. So, if you put that expectation out there in front, and I know there are places and I've heard this quite a bit. People are concerned about that. But if you're upfront about it, they know when they sign up that there's going to be. And when you're doing it virtually, it's much easier to do in person. But COVID made us all do everything. So I've been doing these for the last 5 years virtually. You just have to work a little bit more, but the students help each other. They can become those accountability buddies, and they really, and if one student has a question, I always start the workshops or several or certain ones like, here's how you do the FERPA waiver. Here's what the CSUs are looking for. Here's what the UCs are looking for, or the personal, common app. So I can give them general information and then record it and then I don't have to say the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And so parents appreciate that. And I
Yeah, and
have very few in-person hours during the fall because I'm spending my time doing the application workshops. But if they need me, I'm there. If we need, and even like the essays, those are confidential. So I have everybody in a group, and then I'll just pull students into the breakout rooms. And instead of spending an hour on appointment time just talking about something that may only take 15 minutes, I spend 15 minutes with one and then put them back in the room. They work on their stuff, what we just talked about, what you just said. And then I bring another one in and I can spend a 2 or 3 hour block and I can talk to every single one of the students. And I'll limit to 5 or 6 students at a time. But then I've spent time with every single one of those within that 2 or 3 hour block. I don't have to meet with them one on one,
Yeah.
but if I do, I have the time. So,
Yeah, and that works great. And as I said, if you have a couple of kids that are like really struggling with this and really procrastinating, you could set them up as accountability buddies, kind of even outside of this.
absolutely.
Like, and that's okay, right? To Cindy's point, like you can do this without them sharing what their essays are, or even what their essays are about. You know, if they don't want to do that, that's totally fine. So I don't think if there's an issue from a privacy perspective. The privacy issue is potentially like, oh, I could see who else is working with Cindy. That's usually not much of a, let's put it this way. That's always a much bigger concern in people's minds than it actually is in reality.
Hmm.
Okay, is what we've typically found.
Yep.
But you can also set those up as like webinars with breakout rooms instead, so they can't see who else is on there. There's different ways to do it, and so on and so forth. And then I know we got to get going. I know we had one final thing that came in around, being concerned about being too specific with an essay direction, that they don't want like their student to be stifled by it. Here's the thing, okay? The A lot of times you really need to help them structure the essays from like an outlining perspective in a lot of detail. And a lot of that does need to come from you, okay? Or the Socratic method of making that happen, because they can't do it themselves. Like they've never really had to do it themselves. By the way, by the time they've done like essay 5, 6, like they're doing it on their own, okay? Because they've
Hmm.
seen it, they understand it, they now know what to do, they see the patterns, etc. In terms of identifying what to write about, it's so important. We always start with, and we have this really good application plan section in our course. We always start with what colleges are looking for. Okay, if you teach a student that, and then ask a line of questioning associated with that, then you look at their responses, they look at their responses, they can really identify what they should be writing about, and you can kind of guide them for extra details on that, and they do tremendously well. So you're not being like very prescriptive. It's usually because they're doing some pre-work, they're doing some homework, they're understanding this is what colleges are looking for. You're able to guide them, and they're able to guide themselves kind of into what to write about. And usually like it's not that hard. There's usually not a fight over it. It's usually obvious by the time they've done their pre-work, it's like obvious to everybody what's being written about. Okay.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. Okay.
And that's why I have a two-part class, and I put this in the chat that I teach for UCLA on brainstorming and structure and review. And then I have a workshop on that. But
Yeah.
that's so that's we could spend just time, I can spend 3 hours
Yeah, we could do an
talking about
entire
essays. So
session literally just on that, but we're not doing that
right.
today.
So, Brad, thank you so much. We'll have a lot of this information in the show notes when I publish this. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I hope it did. Thank you, Marcia. I hope it did give you some ideas. And I think the biggest takeaway for most people, I'm hoping, is that, yeah, procrastination is our problem. And we need to have in place systems that can help students. So thank you, everybody. Join me again have a great holiday. Thanksgiving's coming up. We'll be back on December 5th with Jeffrey Neal. We're going to talk about AI literacy for students. So a lot of things that Brad, you just talked
Cool.
about today. We're going to talk about that. And then Emily Pacheco is going to join me on the 19th, and we're going to talk about admissions and the college admissions offices in 2035 and what she sees in that. So
That'll be cool. Emily's like just an incredible resource for this stuff.
yeah,
So
she is
yeah,
a rock
she's really
star.
awesome. Okay,
So
very
thank you,
good.
everybody. Thank you, Brad. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you in a few weeks.
All right.